The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand. We gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want. We got to organize.
It's been estimated that we spend about $500,000 to kill every enemy soldier in Vietnam. When we think about the fact that we spend only $53 a year per person for everybody that's considered poverty-stricken, and half of this is spent for salaries of persons who are not poor, it means that we have to rethink our priorities. And it is my deep conviction that if our nation can spend $35 billion a year to fight what I consider and will continue to say is an unjust, ill-considered war in Vietnam, and $20 billion to put a man on the moon, then we can spend billions of dollars to put God's children on their own 2 feet right here on earth. And I'm convinced that our government is more concerned at this point about winning the war in Vietnam than about winning the war against poverty right here at home. Tools for this purpose is now being used in the killing process. It's made for great problems in the civil rights movement, but it's made for great problems in poisoning the soul of our nation. And so as we go on in the days ahead, it seems to me that it is vitally necessary to see that the problem of the Negro will not be solved until billions of dollars are available to get rid of poverty, to make a guaranteed annual income a reality for every American family. We will continue to remind America that the hour is late and the clock of destiny is ticking out. We must make the right choice for justice and brotherhood. We must go all out to make America one, and this is what the civil rights struggle, or I should say now the human rights struggle, is all about. And if we will make the right choice right here in America, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. We will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All Africans People's Revolutionary Party. I'm Jesse, and I'm here with my fellow comrade Sadiq. And for those of you who don't know and who are not familiar with the All Africans People's Revolutionary Party, we were founded by Kwame Ture in 1968. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, and we define Pan-Africanism as the total liberation of Africa under scientific socialism. And I'll give it up to Sadiq to get into our ancestors who we are honored today.
All right. As you guys know, if you guys have been watching us, and for those who don't, we honor each episode to 2 of our ancestors. This one being the late, great Marcus Mosiah Garvey. I think everyone who's watching this is probably familiar with who Marcus Garvey is. He was the founder of the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and African Community League. He, led the probably the largest movement, in the 20th century, or at least known in human history, of Africans. I think over 2 million Africans throughout the diaspora. And I think he did that by the age of in his late 27 or so. Yeah. So that's a huge feat right there. Yeah. To do that. He had the Black Star Line as well, which is a shipping company that he held within the UNIA to ship products and commerce between the continent and throughout the diaspora. He also had a newspaper, the Negro World as well. And then also he's the one who actually founded what we know as the RBG flag, the red, black, and green flag. Which came out of the fact that I believe it was a white supremacist that said every race has a flag except for a coon, pretty much trying to degrade Africans, saying that we didn't have a flag at the time. Because this was before the colonial movements was going on the continent, and we had our flag for independence or anything. So this was before then. So I guess Marcus Garvey and the UNIA took it upon themselves to come up with the red, black, and green Pan-African flag. We like to honor Marcus Garvey for the contributions he made to the struggle. Once again, led the largest organized movement of Africans throughout the diaspora, at least known in history over the last 100 years. So the second person we are dedicating this episode to is Mariama Ba. She is a Senegalese writer, political activist. She actually was known as a womanist. She didn't really like being called a feminist. She felt it was too Western. She spoke out against violence against women, polygamy, and the lack of opportunities for women in general in Senegal. She always spoke out about the inequalities between the sexes. I believe she has 2 or 3 books that she's written as well. I believe they're more poetry books, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'd like to honor her too as well. So, all right, so I guess we get right into it. I know you guys probably just saw the clip that we have there. Very, very different from the narrative.
Very unusual.
It was an I Have a Dream, essentially. I think it was great because in the sense of it speaks now to the current state that we're in now, right? He's speaking about the military budget and how at that time in the Vietnam War, the money being spent to fight a war, unjust war at that in Vietnam, was used. The money was used more so for that than for the impoverished people here in the United States.
300,000.
300,000
per soldier killed in Vietnam is what they spent, and $50 for everybody here. So
and when you look into now, over the past year or so, or past few months since Biden's been in office, and since COVID has been around, I guess, right? You've seen the defense military budget going up and up, increasing in the midst of a pandemic, while people are becoming houseless. The eviction moratoriums are up. People are not being supplemented money or anything for staying home or lockdowns, at least early on, and even after the fact. People losing jobs. Small businesses are suffering, things of that nature. People are literally just dying, and at the same time, the military budget is going up and up and up. As you can see, if you look at the more recent articles and papers on that. As well. So I think that still holds true to today. A lot of the stuff that King has said, and man, and I think it kind of goes into, like we were just talking about earlier, dispelling a lot of the myths that the system kind of tries to embed in us when it comes to King from early on, and early, first thing we do, Martin Luther King Day is coming up. They roll out the TV and then just play I Have a Dream. And and that's all they tell you about Martin Luther King. That's the only thing he ever did is just talk about I Have a Dream.
Right.
But obviously if you look at it, dialectically, or you look at it more in depth, more intricately at the life of and the progression of his life of Martin Luther King, you see that it's way more to his life than just I Have a Dream and I wanted to do this for integration. And it was funny because Martin Luther King actually engaged in a self-criticism process and said, I made mistakes, essentially, I led my people into a burning house. I believe this is the term he used. Yeah. So he understood some of the mistakes and that he's made and tried to correct them later on in his life. But, as we know, the FBI, CIA, the enemies of the African Revolution, obviously realized he was becoming more of a threat and, did away with him. But we're going to get into it. I don't know if you have anything else to add to the video.
Well, you said that wonderfully. I think, one thing about MLK that comes to mind for me is the man of principle. He stood by his principles, and those principles is what really advanced the struggle, because he didn't have this whole wayward thinking. He was very clear on who the enemy was. And to see that evolution of that understanding is also pretty phenomenal, because, you know, all the media and general propaganda and the snakes, that kind of information coming from them is not giving that radical analysis that he stood by. And he understood that, you know, this is bigger than just, you know, if you're talking about capitalism, you got to talk about racism. If you're talking about racism, you got to talk about capitalism. Those two things are interlinked. And as he said in the clip provided, this is a human struggle, just a human problem. And we can't just identify, you know, all of these talking points for us to just mislocate. You know, if we're not talking about land, we're not talking about people's means to production. And he was speaking about people having a living wage back then, not in the 1960s. Yeah. And who's talking about that now? All we have is $15. Like, he talking about living, he said living wage. Yeah. I mean, that just blew my mind to hear that language, because you don't hear no one talking about living wage now. They're talking about 15. They want us to get comfortable with 15 as opposed to something that's actually substantial. And again, going against the Vietnam War, which I believe was the ticket to his assassination, because America's all cool until you really get to the point of why imperialism is active today. I mean, the reason why America has all of this money is because they're in other countries sabotaging the work that socialist countries are doing in an attempt to build their autonomy. America always goes over there and creates war and, you know, install puppet dictators and all of these things that are done to basically bypass and curve the people's will and determination. And what I really appreciate about MLK is that he stood by that principle, and he understood that this, and I mean, there are obviously segmentations, as you mentioned, in his history where he admitted that he could have improved. He understood that not everything, and even ideologically, I mean, the way he used nonviolence as a tactic as opposed to a strategy, or seeing how he confused those two and made it almost like you didn't have to speak up and you just had to just, you know, hold on. He still had that understanding throughout his life. And if it wasn't, who knows where he would have gone if they didn't assassinate him. But they understood. They wrote him letters. They was like, yo, you could just go back to talking about, you know, unity and stuff. Don't talk about the war, because this is, you know, you're in a territory that's not your lane. And he stood by that. And how many preachers can say that today? I mean, what I preach about MLK is that this man was a preacher, but he still had the audacity and the courage to say it. I mean, he was up in front of the pulpit talking this way. I can't say a lot of folks that have that, you know, a lot of people just, you know, let's bring in the police. No, that's not how you get through. I mean,
Kwame Ture said people out here talking about bringing the police. Like, well, we ought to shoot them. Yeah, you ought to shoot that one.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and then even mentioning Kwame Ture, it's important to acknowledge MLK worked with SNCC. He worked with
the Student Nonviolent Coordinator.
Yeah. He was involved, and he understood his role. And while, again, there were differences in how that role was executed, he was principled enough to stand for what he believed was right. And he knew that by doing that, even with getting the letters from the FBI, even with getting, I mean, it's funny now, because right now when MLK is talked about, they're not speaking about him as when they spoke of him when he was here, because when he was here, he was deemed as one of the most controversial men in America. That's literally that's how they intro him. One of the most controversial men in America. Why was he controversial? I mean, what's controversial about his politics? And we all know what that controversy, where that comes from. And it comes in an interrogation of the system of imperialism. The moment one becomes conscious of the brutality of the system and how ugly capitalism is, and how it's deeper than just, oh, they don't like me because I'm Black. It's deeper than, oh, they treat me bad because they want me to drink from a different water fountain. It's so much more deeper than that. And the moment you can globalize the struggle, and this is what MLK was doing, he had an understanding that it's not just happening here, it's happening over in other countries. And the moment we have that understanding, we're not going to be so chained in this, you know, fight of thinking it's just about how we look, or it's just about who's being represented in TV or who's being represented in media. It'll be about the masses of the people. And that's what we got to get.
Yeah. And I think one thing to talk about with what you're saying is making that correlation with other African revolutionaries who also did the same thing and also has been attacked for globalizing the struggle. Like, it's funny to think that, you know, even though they had their disagreements or ideological differences early on, they kind of met on the same plane later in their lives, like MLK and Martin Luther King. I said MLK and Martin Luther King. I'm bugging. It's late here. It's night. It's night. I'm tired. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Right? They kind of met on the same plane at the end of their life. You know, like essentially, like, you know, one was, I guess you could call like you know, advocating for pro integration. One was against it, and then but they both met at the same ground root eventually at one point in their life as human rights, globalizing the struggle, you know, for the working and poor class people, right? Essentially, like, they both met on that common ground. And it's funny because you see that common thread of Africans globalizing the struggle and the state intensifying their attacks on those Africans or on those people. Essentially, like, you look at Du Bois too, in a sense, like, you know, early in his life, you know, the CIA always played a role in like all these figures' lives and stuff like that at certain points, but you know, I think you don't really see it prominent until they start connecting land and they start connecting the continent and the diaspora into the struggle of Africans all over and other colonized folks into it. Then you start to see that, oh no, this guy is too much of a threat. We have to neutralize him. You know, MLK was going to the continent. He's going to the Middle East. You know, and then shortly after that happened, what happened to him? You know, and then you look at Martin, just like we were talking about here, same thing. In that case, right? So whenever you make that correlation, that goes to show, you know, anyone who has this crazy notion of like, you know, a lot of these people who, you know, ADOS or whoever want to act like, oh, Pan-Africanism is dead. No, like, Pan-Africanism is a threat to the system, as you can see, right. If it's really rooted and it's really being mobilized in an effective way, they're going to try to neutralize it in any means because they understand that Africans cannot control this land. Africans all over cannot control their resources or their destiny, because if they do, that means that we don't control them and we don't control those resources. And that means that capitalism is falling and it's over.
Right. And it's like, no, they're not going to give that up. I mean, they waged the war to even obtain it. So, I mean, from their vantage point, it's strategic for them to not even mention socialism and or even communism, of course. I mean, and even now how it's being used when people talk about socialism, it's democratic socialism, right? It's like there are all these, you know, subwords to make it less threatening because they understand that socialism is diametrically opposed to capitalism. They don't want socialism. They don't want people to have medicine. I mean, even if you look into COVID, as you mentioned, people right now are dying from a disease that's affecting everybody around the world. It's a pandemic. And what is the response from the U.S.? Go to work. Go to work. Like, what do you mean? Like, go to work. Live with this virus. We're not going to provide you with anything because that provision is, again, it's just opposed to what America stands for and what America chooses to do with everything. Everything is about money. So if you want to get vaccinated, you got to have the money to get. I mean, you have to always have something. The most they can give you is a mask or a test. A mask or a test, but there's no provision that's provided. Let's say you have the virus. What's going to be done if you don't have the provision if you don't have, you know, healthcare? Then they're just like, well, I mean, what can we do? You maybe need to work for a job that offers healthcare. That doesn't even, then you have to pay higher premiums. So it's like the system is designed to have you constantly pay for everything. There's no social system in America. And the reason why is because the system, capitalism, is all about exploitation, and capitalism is the ideology of America. That's what America functions through and through. So they'll give us little trinkets and, you know, tokenism and all of that. But when it comes to the bottom line, it's like, well, what labor can we extract to get whatever service you want? It always goes back to that.
Exactly. Yeah, and you can see that. King, not saying that he didn't have that analysis earlier, but you see he talks about that more later in his life, like those contradictions. And I think a lot of that stems from being in the organizations and engaging in those struggles, because Ture outlined it all the time that he would engage with struggles with a king on the nonviolence as a tactic versus the principle. He would engage a struggle with him on denouncing like the Vietnam War and stuff like that, right? So just like those struggles are necessary, and it shows the need for organization. Because if Martin Luther King was just on his own free will, who knows if he would have had that natural progression? Because obviously, you know, maybe he came to those things. It was a mix between those struggles and his own personal understandings and readings and experiences. But who's to say that those experiences didn't have a profound effect on him as well, right? And those struggles didn't have a profound effect on him as well. So, which kind of goes into our line and what we always say is join an organization to, you know, progress. Even myself, like before I joined the organization, even myself, like, you know, I wasn't tying certain things in the way it was supposed to be tied in, you know, from like a land perspective or a gender perspective, so forth and so on. And I came in here and I'm still evolving, I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still trying to, grow my politics and stuff like that. So because the struggles that I've had with comrades in our circle and different committees and task forces and stuff like that I'm engaging in, on top of the PE that I'm engaging in with the party, is helping me grow and connect all these things in the way it's supposed to be. So, you know, you could target the enemy properly. You know, it's kind of like you have a bullet in the chamber. One bullet in the chamber, you can't miss. You have to make sure you hit the enemy at the target. You know, you don't want to just be using, you know, you don't have that ability to just be like shooting bullets everywhere. You gotta know who the enemy is and target them, because this is a protracted war. You know, this is warfare. As much as, you know, we want to dance around it and not call it that, that's what it is, right?
And I mean, just hearing you talk, that just brings me back to the understanding of, you know, doing this work, as you said, being in this organization, it helps me understand how everyone matters. Every voice can change the dynamic of whatever approach we decide to make. It's not just like one person is at the table, one person is, you know, giving you the speech, and then you're just saying amen, right? Like you're able to actually challenge what's being advised, what can be improved, what can be removed, even if necessary. So it's a process in which everyone is involved. And that's something that I really appreciate about, you know, this organization, is just this whole practice of democratic centralism, where everyone is able to just contribute and really struggle on issues necessary. I mean, and again, this culture we're raised in with capitalism doesn't encourage that type of struggle. I mean, most folks are just comfortable letting people get by with not doing any work, or doing most of the work and feeling, you know, maybe silenced through workplace conditions, whatever, not to say anything. And we're just kind of conditioned to just let the capitalist system constantly exploit us. I mean, that's really the framing and the working of capitalism, is just to get us comfortable with this exploitation and just not really challenge just the material reality that we have to face. They come up with, you know, technology advances in a way that distracts us in a massive way. And we're just like, I saw a funny meme where someone posted, like, basically America's idea of progress is the new advanced version of whatever, like the new movie, whatever. But then when you look at socialist countries, they're actually providing cleaner railroads, you know, access to better water. Like, there's actually things you could use that we could benefit from. Whereas over here, we're comfortable with the potholes existing. We're comfortable with just not getting, you know, $15 again, just enough to make it seem as if we're making something. But we're numb and basically taught to not even care about the poor person or the houseless person on the street that we got to look at every day. We're forced to just think that it's something they may have done that contributed to that. Just the rationalizations and the justifications we use, because the system tells us that it's just this individual work. Is the reason why you're poor is because you didn't work hard enough. The reason why you got that money is because you didn't get a better job to, you know, pay that debt. And it just gives people just this, you know, you're languid at that point. You're tired. It's like, man, what can I do? And people have an idea of what the problem is. They can kind of grasp it, but they're still, a lot of times, just their energy is drained because they don't know, you know, they weren't about, like, because if you don't have these things, then where are you going to go? You know, where are you going to sleep? What you going to eat? So it keeps us just kind of on this treadmill. But when you're doing the work for your people and you understand, you know, this is something that's connecting all across the globe, you know, our issues, what's happening in Africa is definitely affecting what's happening here. And when you have that understanding, when you have that awareness, it does convert. And I mean, again, back to MLK, who used love. You know, if you're speaking about love and a genuine form of love, is a radical love that's revolutionary, that's going to actually go against the status quo and make those, disruptions when necessary, because they have to be. And, and yeah, there is a certain adage that comes with that. You're going to be targeted by the state. You got the CIA, you got the FBI. You're going to have these forces. And that's why we have to, that's what's great about an organization also, is providing that comfort and providing that, that family like structure where you're able to, bond together with other comrades and be united against this force of capitalism. But the system it does such a great job at showing us that when we put in our energies into the work, when we actually go out of our comfort zones, that we're going to receive violence in return. But we go forward because we understand we can't just not do anything. We can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to just get a degree and be a slave to the capitalist system. Right? Because if you do that, that's what most folks, that's the easy route, right? But I mean, every day I'm just becoming more and more aware that whatever I want to do, whatever that is, it's like, how can that be used to advance the masses of the people? Because it's not about me. Ancestors came before me, people like MLK Jr., people like Malcolm X, people like Kwame Ture, people that have they're willing to put on the line. Like, how far are we able to make to that commitment for the people? Because again, I don't agree with everything. We don't have to agree with everything with everybody. And a lot of people, when talking about MLK, they find it necessary to mention his affairs and, the FBI. Like, I've seen people like, man, like that, you're focusing on that, but he took a bullet for justice. He knew that him going in this territory, and he was resilient. He was like, I'm gonna still do it. Like, how many people are ready to do that? How easily folks are ready to just shut up whenever their their check is threatened, their position is threatened. It's like, so, you got to respect them, okay, for going forward in spite of. So I'm sorry, I'm on the soapbox now. But yeah.
No, man, no. Get stabbed and, arrested.
Yeah.
And these people be talking from their sofas in their house, talking about MLK was don't belong in no struggle. Can't even, can't even organize a cabinet. You talking about, oh yeah, he was. You're talking about one of the great organizers, that ever lived, amongst African people. You're talking about, this is asinine, man. This is crazy. Just think about people just like disrespecting their ancestors like that. But I think it goes into, because I think some of the stuff you're saying too is like, we're the most propagandized, one of the most propagandized. The debate is debatable. We're all propagandized, all over, for the most part in this capitalist nations and stuff like that. But at least living in the West and just seeing information, living it day in and day out. I hate to use lived experience as like an antidote or like an analysis, but man, I would imagine there's data to probably prove this too. But yeah, the propaganda is through various means. From the time you turn on your TV, not even from that, it's institutionalized from the sense of school. You go to school, private, public. I don't care what school you go to. HBCU, you're propaganda.
You're propaganda, exactly. It doesn't matter.
They tell you they embed in these the cultures. The ideology, the bourgeois ideology in you, the liberalism, the neoliberalism, neoconservatism. They embed in all those different ideologies, which is all backward and reactionary, into us. And we're growing up like that. And there's only a minuscule of us that actually don't grow up like that, or maybe get lucky to have like, parents or family members that like tied into revolutionary work and stuff like that. But for the most part, we are. So then, with that, we have distorted views on our ancestors. And then that's when that's when we have the climate of today where people would just come out and say, I'm not my ancestors. My ancestor was some, docile people who didn't do anything. Like they just sat there and accepted oppression or whatever, right? Which goes into the whole notion of the propaganda around like MLK or even, other ancestors in the past, right? And to some extent, even Malcolm X and, Nkrumah and whatever, right? Whether they calling them despotic, whether them telling them, oh yeah, they were just all they wanted was integration, or whether they're just trying to shift the whole narrative. They do this in many tricky, sneaky ways. The imperialist capitalist media doesn't lie some of the time, it lies all the time.
All the time.
And the only time it tells the truth is the result of a double lie. And that's from Kwame Ture.
There's a lot of double lies right now, because I think it's important to examine on that quote. Like, there's a lot of double lies, and we got to register with those double lies corresponding to just two other former lies that, made that process. Because, it's like you said, from the beginning, we're propagandized. Like, we can't escape it. And that's what really, I think, still amazes me to this day, to look into the nooks and crannies of how this propaganda psychological warfare machine is just imbued in our everyday lives from top to bottom. Like, there's no other way around it. And I think a lot of us like to just undermine that. We think that we have, because as you said before we joined this organization, you might think you got it on your own. Maybe you have a great ability to read a couple of books at the same time. You're reading a couple of articles, but it's more than just reading or even studying. Doing the work, being a part of committees, and actually assigning yourself to different tasks. And all of these things can be tedious, but understanding the necessity. I actually had a friend tell me, like, this work you're doing, man, it's like you doing what the enemy doing. Like, you doing just the opposite of it. Like, you working like them. I'm like, well, in a way, that's dialectical. Like, we gotta be with just as much for, like, they going overtime. Like, and I'm not even acting. I can't even act like I'm doing as much work as I know some people in the party and other organizations are committing. But to understand why this work is necessary, to understand that the reason why is because, again, we're corresponding to a system that is constantly at play, constantly trying to hijack our memories and our minds to why this work is necessary. That's why this work is being done, because it's not about me. It's about the people that come after me. It's about the people that are even here right now and that can be awakened, because, again, this whole acceptance of defeat, of just like, oh, I guess this is just, we can't do nothing about that. Just like it's not going to happen. Like, so many people really believe that. And that just shows you, like, not having that radical understanding comes from lack of organization. And it's one thing to mobilize, because it's not even that MLK was an organization or an organizer specifically, but he mobilized in a way that it was leading to that organization. He still understood that he couldn't do it on his own. And, and honestly, anyone justifying that rhetoric, that kind of shows you the selfish, egotistical, narcissistic culture we live in, that many folks believe that they don't need criticism, or they don't need someone telling them a better way in which they're able to get through. And that's something, once again, every day, constantly, social media, in your jobs, in the schools, in the church, in the mosque, don't matter where you at, there's a general framework corresponding. And I got to mention this too, because I'm a son of a preacher man, right? And I understand that a lot of churches, they don't have that type of radical lens that MLK Jr. did, and I find that just to be a waste of the usage of a pulpit. If you have a pulpit, which I disagree with even to this day, of this idea like, I'm up top, I'm giving you this sermon, listen to me. But if you frame it from that category, okay, you got all of this position to speak of justice. You can, every scripture you have to justify people being kings and queens, you can use to justify being servants of the people. And why isn't that the analysis that preachers have? Why isn't preachers going with that type of rhetoric? Like, we have a system, because if you watch that clip, the same stuff MLK talked about then are relevant even today, even more so now. So that makes it even more so like, wow, and this was in the 60s. We in 2021, we still don't got the minimum wage, $7.25. And they trying to make you go up $8 more. $8
actually,
more.
The actual living wage, I think, to sustain itself in most states would be like around $20-some.
I would say,
so 15 is not even. Yeah.
And they got it. They got it. No one's questioning that. No one's wondering like how they gave the defense budget. It was more than it was requested. So it's never a question about where the money is. It's whether or not the value of the people are in, whether or not there is value in people. And again, the system doesn't promote the value in people. It puts value in things you can buy, commodities, things that you can use, services, and the spell that's got a lot of our folks today is now they're like, okay, I'm not trying to be liberated. I'm trying to have my own business.
Yeah.
I want my business. Like, I want my own storefront. I want people coming to me. And it's like, yeah, but what you paying your workers, boss? Well, I'm paying them. I'm paying them $7.25. Okay. So you want to do you want to continue and not even advance. Like this is the struggle we're engaged in.
Yeah, I mean, I get, that's a contradiction too. But like, not to get on anyone with a small medium. I guess it's just to show the dialectics to it. Like,
Of course,
you can have your own shop, but that's not liberatory. Just having your shop and saying Black Dollar and that's not gonna liberate you. But at the same time, if you want to sustain yourself, your family, we get it. At the same time and whatever. But don't use it as a tool to say that it's gonna liberate all Africans because you got your shop. And now you're going to own the music productions or whatever.
Well, exactly. Well, that's just my point. I don't even feel like people even use it for the aspect of, I wanted to sustain myself. A lot of folks are honest with like, I want the bag. I want to get that. So they're not even talking about liberation. It has nothing to do with, they're like, I ain't trying to sell to just Black people. I'll sell to anybody. So it's like, it's become even more of a distant, you're not really located to your people or to the services of, broader humanity. Yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah, man. Now you brought up a lot of great points, and I think one point too with that is like people don't even. I think before I joined the organization, like I didn't realize how tedious this work. I think we all have this story, like at least those who don't have a organizing background. I had a whole distorted view on what organizing is, and I think it makes me respect Martin Luther King Jr. way much more. Because, the work that they were doing was like, I could have strenuous, man. Like, man, I feel like, I hate to be like, look at the org as like some type of like hierarchical like type of situation. Where it's like, oh, us at the bottom, these people at the top. But it's like, I guess in comparison, like you were saying, to some work that some other comrades do, what I have been doing, been in the org for like 10 years, only been in for like a year, some change, But even the little work that I feel like I'm doing, it's like, man, this stuff is hard. I don't care what nobody says. Right. You can probably attest to it too, man. This stuff is not. This is hard work. And I think people often overlook or disrespect, what it takes for like a Martin or a Malcolm, a Sekou Ture or a Kwame Nkrumah to mobilize people, to put out propaganda. Like it's literally hours. And mind you, we're working under the capitalism. It's a contradiction because we want socialism, but we're working under capitalism where our labor is being exploited. The work is being intensified and stuff we do. And, we have our personal lives. We're trying to like do stuff too. So like the little extra time we do have, we try to put it to organizing. And even that work, it's gratifying. Yes. But at the same time, it is strenuous and people don't understand. Like, even when people say stuff like, "Oh, you guys are just doing, you guys are just doing this, or you guys are just doing that," or that little thing you're saying that we're doing, probably took hours to strategize, right? Hours of meetings and struggles with comrades, and then just a little, even like putting out podcasts here, like exactly. It's not just easy. We have to struggle on concepts. We have to struggle on what we're going to talk. We have to struggle on this, the edit it. It's a form of propaganda, or like when we want to do something internally in the party, we have to struggle on it before. Like when you guys see like the African Liberation Day events we have, we plan that out for like months, like a whole year before we do the next one, and it's literally struggles and trying to find things out and trying to find money and I'm telling you. I don't care what no one says. This is why I refuse, even unless you're flat out counter-revolutionary, or you're aided by the West, or you're literally like an agent of the state. I refuse to denounce any other progressive organizations or revolutionary organizations. Like I won't publicly denounce them because I know how much work it takes. I know what some people say, "Oh, this organization is reformist," and man, they doing work. I don't care what y'all say. Exactly. Like, as much as y'all want to say, "Oh yeah, the SCLC, Martin Luther King's organization, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was maybe reformist or integrationist, whatever." I don't care what y'all said. They was doing work. The work they were doing was hard. Man, I'm in the A-APRP. This work is hard. It's gratifying. This joint is hard. You know what I mean? So I think people have to actually join any struggles before they come back and criticize them, because you're from the bench out here, like you're watching people on TV playing basketball. Oh, I could do that. Right. I could dunk. I ain't jumping from the free throw line. Right here, exactly. It's like, man, when the last time you played? When the last time you went out?
Exactly. When was the last time you did it? It's like, I could be in the league. I could be in it. It's nothing. If I didn't tore my ACL last year, I would have been there. And shut up, man. You know what I mean? So it's like,
that stems back to the bourgeois ideology, though. See, they're saying that because it's in our culture, in American culture, and just the dominant culture around the world. I would say folks are just encouraged to speak without thinking, so it's easy to just like, but then you're not even processing what made that happen. Again, the great analogies with the sports. It's like these folks got to train. They ain't just like they got to train. They got to put their body in, and anything requires practice that you want to be good at. And so it's the same with organizing. Yeah, it's strenuous sometimes. It ain't easy. It ain't like just like let me just shoot from the hip. Like sometimes you got to get back. You got to be rewind. You got to go back and just sharpen that analysis. And that does, again, this is the word, struggle. Struggle is like you got one force this way, another force that way, and you trying to get there. Right. And you understand why you're engaged in that struggle. It's not to say, because a lot of folks hear that and they're like, why would you want to do that? Like that sounds, but that's because, again, the dominant structure is telling you that you don't need to do that. You just chill out, dude. So you struggle alone in the vacuum and don't connect the struggle and think that you're the only one. And that creates that, internal justification for BS, really, because then you're just saying the things that are going on in your mind are the only things happening in the world, and you're not connecting the things going on in your mind are related to the things happening around you. And you need to have an understanding of that and fight with that kind of that same or even a greater tenacity when you're in an organization, because then you're not going to be, just surprised or shocked. Because I think a lot of people have that motion of shock and surprise, and then they do that blame thing. And it's usually themselves as opposed to the system. And that system has to, and this is why we're fighting against system. It's bigger than race. It's big. It's also about people's class. Like you got to have a knowledge of the way these systems are interlinked. And I agree. Back to the point of just like the work that comes into it. I don't see how anyone can struggle or criticize rather folks that are actually engaged in some struggle. If you're not engaged in no struggle, if you're not actually out there doing the work, how can you say anything? How could you say you may have a problem with it, but maybe announce that problem in a way where you're connected to the problem? You have to have that understanding, that awareness, because it's not easy. And again, we don't want it to be easy anyways, because easy comes from just accepting whatever the system gives. A lot of times it's the subservient capitulation that comes in with, everybody just like, okay. Yeah. Don't even think about it. By the time you know about it, by the time you think about it, it's like, oh wow, I'm preaching the same thing that the media told me. I'm just regurgitating the information. It's like, that's what happened if you're not engaged in that dialectical.
Man, I remember reading about how like Secretary and PDG and like they would literally have meetings for like 8-9 hours.
Yeah, 8 hours, 8-9 hours.
We were just on the call for 4 hours.
Right.
How many people can say you if your job tomorrow told you had a meeting for 4 hours, you're gonna tell me you're gonna be attentive that whole, I don't care, it doesn't have to be work, any meeting for 4 hours. And then mind you, it's not like a work meeting, you're not, maybe on a smaller scale, or in some cases you might be struggling, yes, especially if you're a startup company, you're allowed more leeway to struggle on certain topics, whatever. But this is like intensified struggle with comrades for 4 hours straight. You're probably on the phone after like the second hour, like, oh God, what is, what I mean? Like it's hard. I mean, it's long. And even now, just doing this podcast, I was about to fall asleep. I ain't gonna hold you. I'm tired.
I gotta testify on Sadiq's account. He's not lying here. Dude, sleep like early, 6, 7 o'clock, man. It's past my bedtime. Listen, I'd rather be in my bed right now, sleep. That's the easiest thing to do. I could just sleep, man. But I had to struggle with myself and like, nah, I have to do this podcast. I have to be principled about it. But then, like, a lot of people who are not organizations look like, oh, they just want to meet for 4 hours, just talk. They just want to talk. They don't want to do no work. But before you do the work, what do you have to do? Are we going to do some, are we going to mobilize and not be organized? Like, are we just going to just do spontaneous stuff and then like nothing comes out of it? This is protracted warfare. Like, you have to be very tactical on what you do. This has to be tact behind what you do. The revolution is going to come tomorrow. It's a drawn out process. You have to, you have to follow that process. You have to follow things in line with party structure, with what your objectives are for the party, so forth and so on. All right. So we have to fall in line and do things the proper way and struggle with folks internally and externally. So when we're out when we're in a party and things don't match up, well, we have to
progress things in a manner that, that it should be, when things should supposed to be progressed in a certain manner and they're not. So it's a struggle with folks. If you're out and then folks are saying some reactionary stuff and, you're out providing aid and services to the community and you hear some stuff, some comrades are spewing or whatever, or some people in the community, you're supposed to struggle with them. You're supposed to give out pamphlets, propaganda, stuff like that. Like all this, even when people think about propaganda, like propaganda doesn't fall out the air. Like you have to work and like that stuff takes like,
right.
I'm just so
craft that. You got to build it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like people just don't understand. Like this guys are just passing out stuff. And like, do you know how much work it takes to do that? Like even the enemy has long hours. You think the CIA is just like they mail it in after an hour? They're listening to calls. They're tapping, they bugging people's phones. They up at like 12, 1 in the morning. They have different shifts. People come in. People are creating. Back with the COINTELPRO, which is, still kind of continuous now. They just call it different names. With COINTELPRO back in the 60s, when it was prevalent, they were out like, doctoring different letters and stuff like. You think that stuff didn't take hours? They probably were struggling. Oh no, take this line off, put this line in here, so it makes it sound more authentic that it came from this person. Yeah. And do this and then put this name on it. Like things don't just fall out the sky, guys. Like I don't know. I'm sorry, but I'm just tired of seeing the disrespect and like the disrespect on Martin Luther King, disrespect on all these people who were fighting for us, to think that these people were just like, they were out here like running through the flowers and the sunflowers,
right?
Like,
just like
oh yeah, it's all great. Look,
nah.
Oh man, y'all need to engage in struggle, bro.
They were in the fire, and they knew why they were in the fire, and they understood. They committed their lives to it. How many again? For those that are saying they can do it, then do it. Then why are you waiting for? You got the answer. What are you waiting for? You see the problem. You understand we're struggling. What are you doing to advance this struggle? Because if you just sitting around criticizing and it's one thing to criticize, but it has to be a principle. You got to stand on some principles. You got to stand in some process. You got to be involved in some work that will guarantee or at least give credit to what you're saying. Otherwise, anyone can just say they dislike something. But what are you doing? What are you doing to something Kwame Ture would always say. Because when of course, when he was organizing, he talked to folks that were around MLK who was like, I worked with him. I shook his hand. What you doing right now?
Exactly.
What you doing right now to advance the struggle? What are you doing? Oh, I was there. I know. But what you doing now? Like,
I was there. I was there.
It's like, the record to prove that you were there. But what are you doing? And that's the side of it. As you mentioned, like the CIA, the enemy is working. They working 24 hours. They ain't stopping. They putting in overtime. And I mean, in a way, it's like, shouldn't you want to put in overtime for your people? I mean, honestly, that is something that actually inspires me. Every time I get whatever I feel, because even as a child, I always had this burning need to connect with another. And now I understand that comes through, organization and building coalitions and just doing this work to advance humanity. But I always had this need to like, okay, it's not about me, right? It's never been about me. How can I tap into this work to advance the struggle? And the more and more people have that awakening and they understand what these systems are, and you're calling out the remnants of these systems, you're calling out patriarchy, you're calling out gender oppression, you're calling out the ways the system uses all of these things to divide us and to just constantly make us feel like we need to rely on this vision. You call out those things and you do the work, it continues, it grows, and then you understand the necessity for it. In spite of the tiredness, in spite of the, whatever reason you might want to give to not doing it, it becomes again about the nature of why this work is important and why this work has to continue and why there have been ancestors. While we have a foundation to stand on. And it's like when we were reading our last book in our work study with W.E.B. Du Bois, and he mentioned, the world in Africa, when he was just like, Africans arise, like you gotta stand up and claim what's yours. Like we don't have any reason to feel like we can't do it. The only reason why we're going to feel that is if we're constantly being fed that media. I mean, and so, we do have a responsibility because our ancestors didn't have a choice when they were cut off, when their heads were and their tongues were taken out and they were shackled and they were abused for reading. Now we have the tools. We're in a generation now where we can read information fast. We can process information fast. We can obtain the tools that they didn't have the access to. But because of their sacrifice, because of the blood of their that they spilled, we have access. We can use that energy to produce a better world. And we don't have to be complacent. We don't have to feel like, because the same thing that tells us we can't do it is put to rest when we look at what our ancestors did. That's all they did. That's why that's why we're here, because they died for it. They did it, and that's why we can do it. But that knowledge and that stamina comes through, again, that the need to knowing this is a human's rights issue. We all in this together. We're all here separated in the diaspora, millions of us all around the world, and we can tap into this consciousness and respond to that call of action, because, again, the work has already been done. We just got to forward press on with this work, because that work is necessary to combat the work that's being done on us and has been done and justified through the capitalist system. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, man. And I hated to harp on it, man. It was just like, golly, man, y'all don't know the work it takes. And you know, you see all these people saying Martin Luther King was just some education. He didn't do this. He was whatever, you know. Like, but yeah. So I just had to.
No, I appreciate that. You remind folks, dude. Martin Luther King had an organization.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about Marcus Garvey, he had the UNIA. You know, we talk about Kwame Ture. We talk about all of these people who were connected to something greater than them, a force and a process. They understood the necessity for political education, and that's one thing we're doing, and something we constantly encourage so many folks to do, because you have to have that understanding.
How many people could say they organize, you know, the Montgomery boys, bus boycotts and stuff like that? Like, how many people now can say that they could like organize that many people in cities to boycott
before the internet,
strike, or before the internet too? Yeah, like literally, like word of mouth. Like, how many people can really say they could do that now? Within an organization, or like even by themselves, right? Like, even though we know that's not how things happen. Things happen in an organized manner, like through organizational work and stuff like that. So like, how many of us can really say like they can do that? I mean, as much as we want to say, oh, this integrate, can you do it? And if you can, why are you not doing it now?
Why are you not doing it?
Why are you not doing more than he did? If you could do it more than he did, why are you not doing? What's your excuse? Oh, well, Martin Luther King, he could have gave you 1,000 excuses. He could have said all types of stuff. He could have said, well, I'm too busy preaching. I don't got time for that.
Come on.
I'm too busy. I got kids. I don't
right.
care about y'all for it. Right? I could be like any other. I could be like any other preacher. I could be like TD Jakes. I could be like Creflo Dollar. Pray for me to get this jet. I need this jet.
Right. Come on, man.
Lambo.
This is
this Lambo. He could have easily done that. And
that's
for y'all to
the easy
disrespect
option.
him, it's
that's
crazy.
the easy option.
For y'all to disrespect him, it's crazy. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think of shout out to Jamu and our ancestors' voices and his daughter Shakura with the A-APRP and their podcast, because one of their recent episodes was talking about TD Jakes, and I shared that with all my homies in church. I'm like, y'all need to listen to this. You're like, TD Jakes, what the hell has he done? What is he do? Like, he ain't like, he just sold out Pimp Jesus and made him like a necessity to get profit. And it's like, we put value in these folks. So many preachers, again, back to him, and we're going to end it on this because, it's around that time, try to keep it an hour, but still, one thing that should be said, that MLK, he said, or he lived his life in a way that was dire. I mean, most Christian preachers are not in front of their pulpit. Outside of Jeremiah Wright, I believe his name was, with Obama.
Yeah, Jeremiah Wright. Yeah.
He was like, what the hell, America? Like, he's a very, very rare example of that, right? We don't got the Nat Turners and the Joe Browns. We don't got, people standing up for justice like MLK was doing it. And that's what's really missing, because, I mean, where's that radical theology? Where's that revolutionary radical theology where you're able to say the enemy, we're going to call the enemy the devil. The enemy is capitalism. It's imperialism. It's neocolonialism. It's all of these isms that have been designed to separate us. It's not returning the land back to the people. Like, if you don't have that understanding, if you don't connect that awareness, you're going to be misled. And so we have everything we should honor MLK by sharing clips like we shared today, and also by reminding folks that he had to advance his struggle. He couldn't just be comfortable with, not having the same rights as a white person to drink out of the same water fountain or eat out of the same restaurant. It was bigger than that. It was making sure everyone were healthy and enough stamina to understand what the issue was, which is that it was capitalism, and that we have a responsibility to our brothers, to our sisters, to our non-binary folks, everyone has a responsibility to each other. And the closer and the stronger we are unified on that principle of scientific socialism, we can advance a better world for ourselves and for greater humanity. So
yeah, definitely, yeah. Like you hit it on the head, man. And respect Martin Luther King. That was the premise of this. He did work for us, and appreciate all the stuff he advanced, and even the struggles, like Kwame Ture always says, like the small little things, even though they're not like big in our eyes, whatever the case is, like the small little wins that we have based off the struggles that he did, and SNCC, whatever the case is, being able to have some of the jobs that some of us have, wasn't available to us at the time, and that was due to the struggles of Martin Luther King Jr. Being able to wear certain things and do certain things within the workplace or whatever the case is, right? Like even those small little gains, you had the people who shed blood for those gains and who sacrificed their lives and who put in blood, sweat, and tears, were away from their kids, their family, for us. You know what I mean? And that's what organizing, revolutionary organization is about. Is making those sacrifices for the bigger gain of the people. You know what I mean? So don't disrespect Martin Luther King because of that. For that sole reason, don't disrespect him because he did that. So
put in the work. He took a bullet for justice. How many of us are willing to take a bullet for justice? How many of us are going out their way to be like, I'm standing for poor people. I'm standing for anyone who's oppressed. I'm standing against this system. I'm standing against this system that originally gave me a Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm saying, nah, y'all need to get out of Vietnam. Right?
Exactly.
When he said that, they're like, wait.
We gotta do what?
You gonna do what? That type of response, that's the kind of response you want when you're speaking for the people, like, because you don't want the system to be comfortable, and that's what a lot of us were comfortable getting these awards and being acknowledged from the system. The same system Hollywood is used to oppress our people. The media, any institution you want to go to is going to hold on to that white supremacy and that capitalism and that exploitation. So it don't matter what industry you're trying to justify to make peace. They have an agenda, and that agenda ain't changing regardless. No one's going to be the odd one out of the bunch that's going to slow down the reins of the moment you try to do that, especially if you do it without having that principle. If you're not involved in the organization, especially, and you're just reactionary, they come after that. So, like we say, join an organization, y'all.
Yeah, join an organization, fight for justice. You want to be like King? You want to truly honor King? Yeah, you join an organization.
And advance our people's struggle to liberation, and connect also with we also like to mention all of the other people who are making podcasts and propaganda on behalf of the A-APRP. We got Our Ancestors' Voices. We got Forward Ever on Spotify. We have the A-APRP New Mexico that does videos every Tuesday, I believe. Thursdays, yeah. And we're, of course, every Monday. So
yeah. We have the Revolutionary African Women and Our Ancestors' Voices, as we alluded to earlier with the Tamu, his daughter. And so we hope you guys tune into all that. Definitely thank you guys for joining us. I'm about to get some sleep. I appreciate y'all for joining, and forward ever, y'all.
Forward.